I hope to be able to catch up on some of the things which Jerry has started, this morning. So welcome everyone, and I wish to thank all the organizations which have contributed to organizing this workshop, including Open Evidence, which hasn't been mentioned yet, with his company of research group, which within University Oberta of Catalonia, where both Samuel and I and Nuria and the people in the local committee work. And the good news is that if you want to catch up on some of the links which I offer in the course of my talk, this talk is already online on this website, which can be easily found by just Googling my name. And the plan of the talk is the following. I will try to make a point that our now is in a deep and profound transformation that has science as one of the drivers, and that those transformation and the implication of those transformation are quite visible if you wear the lenses of post-normal science, and that these lenses also allow you to suggest some avenues for resistance and reform, as was in the title of the conference. I thought I was original when I thought that A Brave New World was a better description of some aspect of our dystopian present than Orwell's 1984. Then I discovered that other people had the same remark. For those of you who are young who haven't seen this book, is a future in which regimentation is achieved not by the big brothers, but simply by keeping everyone happy with some recreational drug and confusion substantially. And the point I want to make, which is relevant to this discussion, is that we no longer have a single crisis in science, but a crisis which is triple. Sorry, no, I'm here. I'm rushing ahead of my presentation. I want to move from what we said in Tübingen. This is the plan of the talk I gave in Tübingen, so I'm not going to repeat it now. But this talk has to be really intended as a continuation of this point, where one of the points we made here was that indeed PNS predicted the insurgence of the crisis. But we will come back to that. So I was saying, rushing ahead, that there is a triple crisis. There was once upon a time, and I think Mayone referred to it in one of his work, an interface between science, policy, and technology. My impression is that this interface is no longer an interface, but has filled all the space. Because there is nothing about which we can talk today where these two ingredients don't come up together. I believe even if you talk about a football match now, today, you have technology, science, and policy together. And this element especially permeate all discussion about the human condition. Is either so, I'm terribly biased by the kind of books I read, but my impression is that there is a prepotent emergence of this argument in our conversation. And for this, I need to borrow something from social system theory, and I'm taking a risk here because I assume in the room there will be people who know this much better than I. Also because this theory is due to Niklas Luhmann, whose books are notoriously unreadable. I'm trying to read one on love, which is supposed to be the easy one, and is not so easy. But why do I need this? Because among the many interesting things which Luhmann says is that social evolution, it defines modernity as the movement from a stratified society to a society which is functionally differentiated, like politics, science, religion, media, etc. And what do these systems do? They communicate. And so the cultural evolution pushes up toward enhanced movement, toward enhanced communication. Even love, in this famous book he wrote on love and passion, is understood as a generalized medium, generalized symbolic medium of communication. So our fate seems to be that we must move toward enhanced communication, and hence we are kind of compulsive communicators. And this makes me think of a very old book by Lewis Mumford, where he discusses about the technological compulsiveness. So I see these two elements at play simultaneously. On one hand, we are compulsed to adopt new technology. On the other hand, we are compulsed to communicate. And then, maybe you remember this. This is for the younger people. Maybe it was presented at one of PNS symposia. And this is a cover where this guy said, "Oh, you promised me Mars colonies," and instead I got Facebook. Well, if you interpret this in light of what I just said, perhaps we got what we deserved, didn't we? So this is perhaps the brave new world we are entitled to receive. In this context, it's very interesting to ask ourselves who controls whom, and for this I want to use Harari, because he made the point very clearly. When you bump on the road on these zombies, you know, coiled, glued to their iPhone, and you know, even in Barcelona this happens every day, you must watch what the pedestrians are doing, because most pedestrians don't look what they are doing. They run into bikes, they run into cars, because, you know, who is controlling whom? Are they controlling the technology, or is the technology controlling them? As a side topic in this conversation, we heard already the issue of power. There is the relation of all these nexus with capital, with capitalism. And this was done very well by, again, in Techniques and Civilization by Lewis Mumford already in 1934. And if you can read here, under the influence of capitalism, it starts with the romanticism of numbers. I mean, numbers are all important in this story, and I won't be able to talk much about that in this talk, but if you follow our course Number for Policy, this will come out very clearly. In a sense, this is a very old crisis, because from the anarchists like Kropotkin and Bakunin to the fathers of the ecological movement to the... Oh, something happened. What? Well, I can...
Just the cable. Just the cable.
The cable, maybe. Okay, but... okay, fantastic. To the postmodern thinker, this concern that we were not quite doing it right with science and technology was always there. It was really a very long story. I cannot, go through all, but let me offer you flashes. This is again 1930. This is Dewey, and he saw this as a great contradiction of our civilization. We had developed these incredible tools, and we used them to do the old things. So the tools are new, but we use them in a way in which we don't control them. And this constitutes also a danger and a challenge. Now we jump to the 1968, to the student revolution protest against the Vietnam War, and here we have Paul Goodman, who says that science corrupt the air and science serve the military apparatus, and this was a very important discussion at the age of the Vietnam War. You remember Agent Orange, developed by Monsanto. The older people may remember the Jason project by the American scientists to reinforce the American military machine. And this is now resurgent. We haven't heard much about science for the military application, but now this discussion is coming back with a vengeance, especially in the companies like Microsoft and Google, while people realize increasingly that their technology are being put to a bad military or authoritarian use, as in this case for apprehending illegal immigrant or supercharging American war machine. This article is very recent, just a few days ago. I promised the father of the ecological movement, here they are, especially Schumacher, and they had also, and here we collect to the numbers of Jerry, strong doubts on the quantification of the impact of the new technology, which is a recurring theme in PNS as well. And it is also discussed a bit later by Langdon Winner in a number of interesting books. And then we have the postmodern reading. Lyotard told us that this alliance between knowledge and power, scientized knowledge and power, which is the base of modernity, is in grave crisis. So I'm trying to make the point that the triple element here. And then for those of you who have read the work of Chapin and Schaeffer, the idea that social order and knowledge are strictly linked to one another. So that is why we have now a simultaneous crisis of all these systems together. So I want to be sure I haven't lost any of you with my rather convoluted story, but what I try to say that the crisis is triple: science, technology, and policy, needs to be triple, and has been announced. If communication is our destiny, this destiny really will be hard to escape, because we are confronted with a self-organizing machine, a kind of, what what the ecologists would call autopoietic system, efficiently coupled with capital. I didn't mention that Luhmann was very fond of Majorana and Varela, so he was using the same concept. And the consequence of the crisis is that we are very much divided. For the laity, all becomes a conspiracy. Those of you who talk to young people may have a better appreciation of that. They have a total distrust of science. They believe the most crazy conspiracy theory, from the Twin Tower being collapsed by the CIA to we haven't been on the moon to chemtrail and what's not. The science community is largely on denial. This is a topic on which I've written a lot, and this is one of the reasons why we are still a minority by holding to this opinion. And for the lobbyists, of course, this is another excuse to cut regulation. In a sense, Silvio Funtovic and I predicted that this was going to happen. I mean, I believe that Silvio and I brought clearly that the crisis and the science war were becoming worse very quickly, especially in America, in this article, which we published together on The Conversation in 2016. And then, well, what you see here is that when I speak about denial, here we have Fanelli, which is an excellent scholar, which has all my respect. But Fanelli writes, in a clearly defensive position, that the new science increases narrative is not empirically unsupported, but is also quite obviously counterproductive. I mean, you know, should we care whether it is counterproductive, or we want to know whether we have it or not? Anyhow, on the other side, as I said, people want to, on the conservative side, people want to attribute the crisis to neo-Marxism, radical feminism, post-colonialism, of course, postmodern. I mean, the only things on which the left and right agree in this discussion is on their contempt for postmodern thought. But of course, they see this as an excuse to even cut even further regulation in North America. So you heard the story about the Secret Science Reform Act. Of course, climate change is never too far away, and hence it's all too easy to conclude that if half of all the papers are wrong, also half of the IPCC papers are wrong, and then climate change is a Chinese conspiracy. But, you know, and then you have and now this becomes, you know, difficult. And then we have a community which should be more or less close to STS, scholars of science and technology studies. Well, they have a tendency to defend science in order to defend the planet. I mentioned Stephen Shapin before. He was one of these defenders. But here I take it with Bruno Latour, which in recent time has become quite changed from his previous self. Now, he's no longer the guy of laboratory life and science in action and n'avons jamais été moderne. Now he's defending scientists. He's very worried that his thought might be used by, you know, those denying the ecological crisis and the climate change. And in this very long and in somewhat corny article on the New York Times Magazine, he says, it was as though the ice was sending me a message. I mean, you know, this kind of, we have to stick together because the planet is in danger. We cannot afford to discuss, you know, our problem. I think this is really what I find dangerous and extremely conservative in the behavior of science institutions. So this is not a larger or faster version of the old crisis. And now I want to go to the more, in a sense, algorithmic nature of the crisis. We have time for discussion later on, so I hope that you will argue with me whether this or not is true. The Salem witch trial is different from the hashtag Jews did 9/11. You know this hashtag? You know, it's a hashtag to say that the Twin Towers were collapsed by the Jews conspiracy. No, this is, and then I also, again, we stay with Sion, with anti-Semitism. The Zion protocols are different from the deep fake technology. You know, the deep fake technology is where you can do something, act and say things he has never said or acted, okay? Why I say that? Well, they are universal, they can update instantly, and they can be automated. So if you tell me this is the same as before, I will try to say that this is not the case, okay? I'll say this is different, no? So instead of an evolution of the mind, which is you expect, also following what we said about Luhmann, you can have now mind hacking on an unprecedented scale. This is what is written these days by Jerome Lanier, but also by Yuval Harari, those who have read his books. So instead of science fostering social discovery, which was the idea of Dewey, the science has this constructive capacity to make us aware of problem, we have a poisonous algorithm which either willingly, on purpose, or unwillingly make our life worse and make us better person and make our democratic process more difficult. When I say willingly, because you have, Russian bots trying to intervening into the dispute on vaccine to make us fight more on vaccine because the objective is to divide society, which they see as their enemies. So this is a purposeful use of algorithm to make us worse. But then you can have the unpurposeful poisoning of the social life on the social media, which is just generated by the algorithm searching for methods to keep us online longer. And this is what Jaron Lanier described very well in his latest work, explaining why we should close our social account immediately. So my conclusion is that instead of a strategy of confusion, you remember this was an old story, we have a confusion without strategy. That this is new, isn't it? So recap, again, in order not to lose you. The crisis is generating deep divisions, and the crisis, in a sense, a new kind of crisis. Now we come to the topic of the conference. In one of the first articles where Silvio and Jerry mentioned post-normal science, this was in 1990, they say something which later they don't say so clearly, but it's, I think, very important. Post-normal science is neither value-free nor ethically neutral. And I contend, and I discussed also when we were in Tübingen, that a complete diagnosis of the crisis, also with a theology and also prediction of how it would unfold, was offered by the foundational work of post-normal science, which are these two books. In the first one, you have really all the problem of collapse of quality control, little science versus big science, and how the quality system could not survive this transformation. And then on the other books, the books which Jerry mentioned in his introduction on NUSAP, you have this concept of quality as fitness, and then you have really a critique of those numbers, those numbers used for making the policy. So really a fight against reductionism, or against what Maione called decisionism. It's the same concept. And especially on the need to have developing craft skill in using this number. And you have NUSAP, for which Jeroen van der Sloot here has made a lot to make them mature as a tool. So, and then maybe I can say something about the maturing of structural contradiction. This is another work done more recently by Jerry, where he tried to condense the PNS analysis of the crisis. The contradictions which are emerging, which I list here, could be seen as a contradiction between the public image of science, the one Jerry said is not yet under real attack, and science role, not as an instrument of profit and growth. So we have a contradiction between the illuministic view of science, but also science as a colonialistic and imperialistic instruments. Then we have the problem of the management of uncertainty in science, with the way which may lead to technological hubris, to techno-optimism. You all have seen and read what the people in the eco-modernism manifesto write and say. And then continuing on this list of contradiction, we have contradiction between technological progress and technological risk. I mean, this is also Maione made this remark in his book. The people who develop the technology for some reason never have a full appreciation of the risk which they are producing, also because they mostly operate in the metaphor of nature as a machine. No? So they believe that if nature is a machine, you can put the hand inside, twist a few knobs and obtain the desired behavior from nature, like when you do GMO. But this is okay. And then again, the quality arrangement of little science versus big science. And in a sense, and this was mentioned by Jerry in his talk this morning, we have a contradiction between the democratic aspiration of science, and the practice which are in a sense elitistic. And then we have this issue of the proletarization of the research community, which I think should be at the core of the concern of PNS. I think we should be aware of this because there isn't much discussion about that going around. No? These are the exact words mentioned by Jerry. And then, of course, you have all the kind of conflict between ideals and incentive in science, which we discuss also in Tübingen. And here I use some image from the famous cover of The Economy. But, this is a minority report. Let's be clear. No, we are here among friends. I say things and everybody does like this, but this is a very special group of people. Outside is totally different world. The mainstream goes somewhere else. This year, the Nobel Prize was given to Nordhaus, and the Holberger Prize was given to Cass Sunstein, and both of them are strong advocates of this kind of cost-benefit analysis, which we condemn as totally implausible, fantastic number. I don't remember which word Jerry used, but you know, this kind of the production of this imaginary. And then we have even very aggressive books like Steven Pinker extolling the virtues of enlightenment in a totally acritical way and attributing all what is dystopian about modernity to romanticism, you know, forgetting that perhaps there is something of the illuministic also in Stalin, President Mao. And all the, you know, kind of dictatorial twist of the Illuminism. So where will all these lead? Well, there are different possible evolution, different possible scenarios. Jeremy Len talks about the possibility of a techno-split. I find this quite plausible. Also Harari, in a sense, discuss about this. You could have a rich man versus poor man science, you know. You have Elon Musk and his Mars missile. No? You have transhumanism, but only for the well-off. No? Clearly, precision medicine will not be for everyone. You could have collapse, of course, and in politics, this will lead to, we are seeing this, no? Nativism, nationalism, authoritarianism, the politics, terrible simplifier mentioned by Burkhardt. And in science, we have the war of all against war. I don't know how many of you have heard about the grievance science ox. Can you raise your hand, please? Okay, very few. But this is a kind of repetition of the Sokal affair, very sad and very nasty in a way, but you don't know whether you agree with those who play the ox because they have a point, or those who, you know, were the target of such an ox. But this is again is a going back to an old science war, which is, you know, very, could mean that we have reached a point of total war of all against all in science. But we can also have that the system keeps running. You know, my ex-organization, the European Commission, has great hopes in something called Open Science, Coalition S. I don't want to shoot on them. I mean, you know, let's see what they do and try to follow with them, because indeed, if we can achieve something in open science, is something we all want, but we also have to be aware of the dangers. And Philip Mirovsky has written very eloquently about that. There is a danger of uberization of science. Platform capitalism is never far away. And of course, when you have a quick transformation, the incumbents, those who have the means and the power and the money, can most likely take advantage of it. So we have to follow this very, very carefully. Of course, we have better hopes. We still want to use the word reform, and Silvio has been the first one maybe to use it in the context of the present crisis in an article with Jerry a few years back, and we discussed this also in London when we had this conference on anticipation. Reform was also used during the '68 movement. And again, Paul Goodman spoke about reformation, about belief which have a religious depth, which would not involve destroying the faith. This is an important element of post-normal science. With all our doubts about science, we never thought we want to do without it. And then Paul Goodman goes on to say, we don't give away this faith, no? But we have to change it, because as it is now, it has been corrupted. Okay, so I conclude here, so maybe I also stay within my time. We do have a post-normal agenda of resistance. This could be food for discussion. Maybe not all is here, but one thing is to recast our public conversation about science. Science is not a victim. I hate, scientists when they play the victim, when they even use conspiracy theory, and they attack the conspiracy theories, but it is in a way which wants to suggest that science has all the epistemic authority. No? This is not the way you should treat people who believe in conspiracy theories. You should engage them, not say that they are. Now you call everyone is a denier. You doubt on climate change, you are a denier. Doubt on vaccine, you are a denier. This is really an awful way to hold a public conversation. Then again, we had to seek inspiration from the radical in the 70s. I took the sentence from a paper written a few years back. And if we want to change the world, we had to change science itself first. No? So we have to turn the deficit model on its own. The deficit is on science. It's not on the people who don't know enough science. And then, if possible, we should privilege working with NGO and with scientific proletarians rather than working with powerful science institutions or even lobbyists. An important element is this knowledge asymmetry. We have worked a lot on the idea that evidence-based policy suffers from incredible knowledge and power asymmetries. So should really be seen and looked at, and when useful, contested. No? So we should support in this kind of discussion the weaker stakeholders and help them to shape the question asked of science. And then again, we want to fight methodological corruption. And again, here we go back to the numbers. So we want to deconstruct shoddy quantification, and for this we have Jeroen van der Sloijs with his work on USAP and my work on sensitivity, auditing, and the like. But if you wish, and this is my last slide, the manifesto, let's say, of our resistance is this course we have put together with some help also from some colleague here in Barcelona, Open Evidence and UOC, on numbers for policy. So the course is not just about numbers, but because it's a long course, takes 5 days. Here you see the first lessons as they appear on the web. The social organization of science, the case of the p-test and the science reproducibility crisis, then prodromes of post-normal science, then knowledge quality assurance and NUSAP, and then reductionism and complexity. And these are just the first lesson. It continues. Now you can see where this leads. Okay, this is really construction of a syllabus to, in a sense, offer a new image of what the conduct of science could be like and how you could go about the crucial issue of quantification. Okay, I thank you for your attention.